Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining at this session of the Milton Warrant Committee. We have a few things to talk about tonight. Lynn, would you please take the roll so we can be certain of who is here?
Sure. We have Lorraine, Dave, JJ, Emily, John, George, Kristen, Steve, Erin, and Kathy.
Excellent. Thank you all very much for spending the time tonight. I also see Ned, our friend Ned Corcoran. Hi, Ned. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, we're grateful for the time that you spend because I'm sure you can answer some of the questions that might come up as we bring the memory care unit article to a vote. Question for everyone. Did you all receive the minutes from the 12:20 meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. If there are no changes to that, the chair will entertain a motion to accept those meeting minutes as presented.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Any discussion on that? Any alterations, amendments, changes? Hearing none, Lynn, please take the roll.
Lorraine,
Yes.
Dave, JJ,
Yes.
Emily,
Unmute.
Emily, you're muted. I'll come back to Emily. John,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
and Emily.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Terrific. Thank you. Motion passes. Meeting minutes of 12:20 are accepted. Our only outstanding minutes, therefore, are last Monday's and of course tonight's, but we have some time on that. A little housekeeping before we begin the discussion. We will have the recommendations that we will absolutely have to vote on, the wording of the recommendations by Monday from Town Council. So we will need one meeting. I think it should be at that point reasonably perfunctory, because if we take the sense of the committee vote as to how we feel about these articles as presented, then it should be a very, very statutory thing almost for us to take the vote. So as we have two articles that we still have, technically four articles, but two principles that we have to consider. One is the memory care unit. The other is the accessory dwelling unit. I think we can engage in the conversation about how we feel about the memory care unit and Milton Hospital's sale of this property and the construction on this site, which has conservation land and which Ned Corcoran very carefully and I think very thoroughly explained to us the kind of meandering, and I think that's the right word, Ned, approach that has to be taken to get all the approvals from the Historical Commission, the Conservation Commission, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for our sense, send it to town meeting. I think we have to have a sense of how we feel about this use of Milton Hospital's property, and the question of, yes, it's in the master plan, but there are other questions that have been posed that we need to address. Yes, the memory care unit is a great idea. However, is it the right site for it? Is there a guarantee that Milton residents will be given priority? How long will that priority last? What assurances do we have? And I'm certainly not accusing anybody of a bait and switch, but things like this have happened in other places, in other towns, and to some extent happened a little bit here in Milton once upon a time, which made people very concerned about development over time. So I think the questions that we have to answer, are we satisfied that this, I think we all recognize the need. I don't think that's a question. The question is this the right thing in the right place? And is the town benefiting from this adequately for what is being given up in terms of the potential traffic, the abutting issues, the conservation issues, the wetland issues, which my experience with wetlands and living on the river and having a house at Cape Cod where we are on wetlands, there are incredible restrictions and incredible hesitations from other conservation commissions to let you do anything with wetlands. So I think we are obliged to have this conversation and to highlight this to town meeting so that they're aware that we have talked about this, that we think whether or not we do think there is appropriate offset as a benefit to the town for what may potentially being sacrificed. So I'll phrase it in those terms. I'll frame it in that term. And so before we take the vote, I'm open. I think we open the discussion to commentary and questions that might be there. Ned, thank you for joining us in case there are additional questions or clarifications that we might need. So are there any questions, anything anybody wants to bring up at this point? Because I don't want to use Ned's time any more than we need to. Are we reasonably satisfied as a group that putting this forward to town meeting, I'm trying to anticipate, as we do often, questions that will be raised because, this has happened to us before. Did the warrant committee think about this? Did we think about that? Did we discuss it? And I know we usually discuss things, many different ways. I do want to have everybody zero in and have the opportunity to present ideas and concerns as they may exist. JJ, please.
Hi, thank you, George. Ned, just wondering, like George was mentioning about the Milton resident prioritization, how exactly does that work? And what is the enforcement mechanism for that?
There is no enforcement mechanism in the zoning for it. These are uniquely local projects. This developer, Northbridge, has entered into agreements with other municipalities as part of their moving forward through zoning and other permitting. At such time as we move into the permitting phase, they would be entering into a similar type of agreement with the town. That would become enforceable. But at this point, we're talking about zoning. And we're talking about zoning that was produced after 8 months of effort with the planning board and neighbor discussions. The planning board met to discuss this zoning at least twice a month, starting in June, all the way through the public hearing in December, and voted twice, 5-0, to advance this zoning article to town meeting. Planning board has the purview of zoning in this town. I know that the warrant committee's recommendation is significant, but I think the warrant committee really needs to pay deference to the work that was done by the planning board, to consider all of the implications of development in this case, to put together a very tight and restrictive bylaw. The materials that have to be provided, the tests that have to be done, the information that has to be sorted through, the peer review process that will have to be engaged in and would be paid for by this developer is significant. The planning board hearing process will be significant. The Conservation Commission process will be significant. There's no guarantee of an outcome through either one of those two processes. But the planning board has considered all of that and made a very strong recommendation that this article ought to advance to town meeting and ought to be approved by town meeting so that this development has an opportunity to go forward.
So we shouldn't be talking about anything but planning board issues, nothing outside that purview then?
I can answer that one. We
I
can.
mean, you certainly have the right to consider other implications. The planning board doesn't consider, for example, tax benefit, other benefits that come to the town. And certainly this committee has significant consideration for that. What are the other benefits? And I think obviously those are important for this committee to weigh going forward. And, this is a fallow piece of property that is being monetized for the benefit of the town, for the benefit of the hospital. It'll become a new commercial taxpayer, paying a significant new amount of tax revenue on an annual basis, estimated at least $275,000. That's new tax revenue. That's new growth for the town. That's not subject to Prop 2.5 override in the first instance. So it's a significant benefit. It meets a significant need within the town that's been recognized. I think you heard very eloquently from Deborah Milton the other night. And there are limited opportunities in town to do any type of development. We have very little in terms of developable land in this town. And one of the things I pointed out the master plan the other night. The master plan was developed by input of over 500 citizens of the town bodies, town boards. It was adopted. One of the primary goals was to take care of an aging population in this town. We have lots of independent living. We don't have assisted living, and we certainly don't have memory care. That's an important consideration. Our plans, the master plan, the housing production plan, the goals of those plans to expand commercial development opportunities, to create new tax revenue, to take care of this, that, and the other, fly around the town at about 5,000 feet. They're wonderful. They're nice pieces of paper. They're beautiful. But every time I take a project and drop that one of those plans to the ground, all hell breaks loose. Oh, well, we didn't mean it here. Or we didn't think you were going to put it here. That's true in every neighborhood that I work in.
Absolutely.
We didn't expect that to come here. Now, I no longer live in Milton. Full disclosure, I recently sold and moved out of town. But 10 years ago, I permitted an expansion of the Milton Hill House, which is in my neighborhood. It took a lot of work. It wasn't very popular for a while within my neighborhood, but it was a good outcome. People today would say it was a good outcome. This is similar. It's change, it's new, it's different, but the town has to be more willing to absorb change, to affect the type of change that it wants to receive, as opposed to the change that's otherwise coming. I'm representing 2 neighborhoods in opposition to 40B projects that have been filed. There are 9 40B applications in some form of hearing in this town. In my opinion, we've rolled out the red carpet to the 40B development world because we say no, no, no. We punch developers in the nose. We expect them to say, thank you, please do it again. And then give us your pound of fresh, and maybe we'll let you develop. In our process of going through a significant process for rezoning a particular site, we're one of the few towns in the Commonwealth that does site-specific zoning, that does zone the site plan. We develop the site plan, then we do the zoning, which is what has happened here. And then we have a special permit process. That's a difficult, expensive process to engage in. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's what we do. It's how we do it. That's fine. My clients are big boys. They understand that, but it's a difficult process. The outcome is often, I think what happens in many cases, though, we scare away good development. We say no to other good development. And what we're left with are things that we don't want and wish we didn't have. This is a high value, low impact development, no impact on schools. It will create job opportunities. It'll create opportunities for kids in the schools to come work and learn. It'll create a synergy with Curry College and its nursing program, synergy with the hospital, a synergy with Winter Valley, synergy with all of the other adult living facilities. It's huge new economic growth, tax development without impact. There is no traffic impact.
There's no question that there is going to be a benefit on the revenue side. I think that's very, very clear. And that it's a memory care unit, there's not going to be a lot of parking competition. And Highland Street has become a pass-through for a cut-through, which is one of the reasons why some residents have voiced concerns. But again, it's visiting people going into the memory unit. It's not residents going in and out 2 or 3 times a day. So it's a very, very different paradigm. And I take your point, Ned, and I think we have to be mindful of this, that this is a project which has some value to an aging population. And I liken it to the hospice that was built at the corner of Reedsdale Road and Randolph Ave when St. Elizabeth's Church sold an acre or 2 of land there that had been empty and with a historic yet derelict house on it for many years. And now there's a very nice looking hospice there. Not a lot of traffic impact. Of course, it's Randolph Ave, so who cares? Because there's a lot of traffic there anyway. But the end result is that you have people in town who are terminally ill going hospice there, so their families are able to stay in town, be close, etc. So I think that we can recognize the benefits to that. I think the laborious nature of our permitting process necessarily does include the issues with wetlands and conservation that we have to make sure that the town is mindful of too. Our job is to highlight. I think we have some interference. Is somebody there's muting that should happen somewhere or other? There you go. Thank you, whoever. Appreciate it. The issue that we have, our job as the Warrant Committee, is to weigh the recommendations and the purview of each of the boards of the town and bring it to the town meeting to decide. We don't decide anything, they decide. And our opportunity here is to weigh the plus and minuses that we see from the input of the different boards. Now, the planning board unanimously believes this is a good idea. I don't know that we hear anything yet from conservation, but that hasn't happened, Ned, yet, has it?
No, well, here's what's happened with conservation. Conservation issued 2 orders determining where the wetland boundaries are, what the nature of the streams are, and what preliminary work the developer can do to test soils for purposes of site design.
Okay.
Those were appealed. Mass DEP last week, we just got copies yesterday, upheld both orders issued by the Conservation Commission. They approved in very strong language the orders issued by the Conservation Commission. They may be subject to a further appeal, but the Conservation Commission knows about this project. They know what's planned to be done. They conducted site walks. They haven't made decisions as to specifically how the development will be allowed to happen, because that information hasn't been available to it yet. There are very significant and specific design guidelines that have to be followed, that have to be reviewed and approved by the Conservation Commission. They will determine whether or not the project plans adequately protect the wetland resources.
So
That's in their
question.
purview.
That's an important point. If for some reason the protest is upheld, is there a possibility that the project can continue with a design modification? I mean, it wouldn't. I guess the issue is if there are wetland considerations.
The wetland determinations that we requested were approved by the Conservation Commission, and Mass DEP agreed with those determinations made by the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
So we think we have a green light to move forward relative to soil testing, soil analysis, and site design, which will go forward at some point, assuming that the zoning is passed. If zoning is passed, the developer will move into that next phase of significant amount of engineering analysis, wetland protection analysis, et cetera, et cetera. There'll be plans filed both by the planning board, with the planning board and part of the special permit process, and with the Conservation Commission, each with jurisdiction over 2 separate components, interrelated but separate components of the project. Each will have to approve the plans that are filed, issue significant permits with teeth, lots of teeth. And it is, I can tell you, having gone through the special permit process for Woodmere, for Walcott Woods, for other projects that went through this type of preliminary zoning, that then had to go through the permitting process with both the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission. Those are long, tough processes. The Planning Board does a very good job of protecting the interests of the town and the abutters. The Conservation Commission does a very good job of protecting the wetland interests on the site. This is a big boy site. This is a difficult site to develop, but we've got an outstanding team of experts who are ready to go, and we're very confident that we can satisfy all of the requirements that are laid out in the zoning, but are also laid out in the Wetlands Protection Act and the town's wetland bylaw.
So question.
May I?
Questions. Hang on one second.
Yeah.
Question, Ned.
Yep.
If there are some complications with conservation going forward that require modification of the design, so that, for example, that you made a good point that, parts of it are below grade, only a story and a half is going to be visible from the road, that would concern some of the residents and the abutters, et cetera, et cetera. If the Conservation Commission came back and said, you're going to shrink the footprint, and all of a sudden you had 2.5 stories, whatever, would that require a revisit to the planning board potentially to see the plans that have been modified?
If the requirements were such that they affected what's required in the zoning, yes, we'd have to come back to the planning board. We may have to come back to town meeting for an amendment to the zoning.
Okay.
That has happened in other cases.
I know it has. Yeah, I know it has. But I just want to make sure that everybody on our committee understands that what is presented now may change, in which case it has to come back and we can review it again. So
That's right.
The risk of the bait and switch that happened in a couple of other projects of which I'm aware 20 and 30 years ago won't happen this time. So, and
Yeah,
I think
my experience in 15 years permitting projects in this town, I have not seen a bait and switch.
yeah, that's good, because it did occur many years ago. And I think one reason why people have tightened things up is because they didn't want to be fooled again. But anyway, that having been said, are there other questions that we can talk about, or are we ready for a vote here?
I just
I
had a
don't-
quick question,
Go-
Mr. Chair. Ned,
Go ahead, Aaron.
given all those wonderful hoops that you have to jump through for this project, and I work with some of the seniors here in town, and I can tell you that I have 2 clients right now that could really use this facility. So I'm wondering, how long is this, what's the projected timeline here, Ned? And I know you can't give me an accurate answer, but is it 10 years or is it 5 years?
I think 3 to 5 years 2 to 5 years is realistic.
Okay, thanks.
And it would depend on whether there are appeals taken. If there are no appeals filed, assuming the zoning is passed at the end of February, the Attorney General's office will review it and approve in mid-May. That gives us the green light to file. We'll be spending, the winter and spring designing. We'd file concurrently with the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission sometime in late spring, early summer. Conduct hearings through the fall, into the fall, maybe through the fall. The Walcott Woods took 4 months to go through the Planning Board. Well, I could see this would take 2-3 months of hearing process with the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission. Again, assuming no appeals, construction could start sometime in 2023, early to mid 2023, probably 18-month construction timeframe. You're into 24, 25 timeframe when it's open.
Is the hospital obliged to disclose the sale price?
No,
Okay.
George,
that's confidential.
Henny, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Cochran. Having you here is such a privilege, because you give us the history, you give us what to think, you say stuff. As I'm about to ask a question, you answer it. So it is really a pleasure, I have to say, having you here, having all the experience, and keep coming back.
Ned is a real deal, and he knows where bodies are buried too.
He knows where all the bodies are buried. At the
He
same
knows
time,
enough anyway.
And my nose is crooked.
Oh,
it is,
stop.
at the same time, you'll be back next month telling us not to develop something else, not to build 40B. You give us all the counter arguments. You tell us why we should protect our neighborhoods. You are, like you've been very clear. You've been very focused in disclosing everything, and we really do appreciate that. In previous projects that we run into, we've come into a situation where, as Mr. Chair has said, the town will say, why didn't you guys think about what happens if we cut 10 beds off, if it's a 50 site unit or a 40 site unit? Now, having worked in the Alzheimer's a little bit from a pharmaceutical perspective, I know this is going to be a healthy reimbursement. Memory care, as Aaron and others have said, this is an expensive area. There should be a healthy reimbursement. They should be able to really recoup some. I mean, there's nothing out there. We all know about the Biogen drug going on. There's nothing out there. Have you thought about at what point it's not worth it for Avita? Have you all discussed if the town says, you know what, we like it, but can you make this 50 care unit and not jeopardize this much of wetlands? If conservation comes back and pushes back on us, do you all have a sort of a deal breaker number of beds that you're going to need?
Right now, we think we need 70 units and 78 beds, and that's been the position we've taken all along. But that's the number needed to to economically run this type of facility, given staffing levels, given patient levels, et cetera. That's the number. If it were possible to shrink it, to make it easier to permit through the neighborhood and others, we probably would have done that by now. I don't think we're in a position to do that.
So what you're saying is you've come in at your base, which
We've
is
come in-
surprising, right?
No, what I can tell you is this: the hospital received at least a dozen, if not more, proposals for the development of this site. Several, and this is not the only assisted living facility. There were a couple of others that were much denser, had 3 levels. This was the least dense, least impactful development that was offered. It still offered a good return to the hospital, and it offers a good return to the town. One of the things that impressed me, or has impressed me with this developer client, is the thought that went into the design of the facility, the design of what they needed, how they were going to attack the development of this site, understanding the wetland implications, et cetera. They did it with their eyes open, and they came in with a plan that they thought could work, that would be as less impactful as possible. This developer operates more than just memory care facilities. They've got 5 or 6 Avita facilities, which are memory care, but they have others, and they could have chosen another model if they thought it could fit and be more, generate a better return for them. But in this case, they read the market pretty well. They understand the need for memory care. It is a specific category of assisted living, and it is one that could fit within this site. It's a similar size to what's in Needham, similar to what's up at the Anna Jakes Hospital in Newburyport. It's similar to one that they're opening in Marblehead and one in Plymouth. They're smaller than the normal assisted living. The assisted living, the other bylaw that's in place for assisted living was put in place substantially for the property that's the horse farm over across from the DPW yard off of Randolph Avenue. That was 90 units, a single building. That was the template of the that we used when we started looking at this zoning, because we already had zoning on the books that had been vetted through town meeting. So we used that. There was a whole lot of stuff added to it that was more specific to protections for oversight from the planning board perspective. But we also acknowledged this is a different site, and that memory, and at the end of the day, we took out the planning board's suggestion. We agreed. We took out the general authorization for assisted living. We made it very specific to memory care, special care, and we focused on what was minimally necessary for this development to work. We negotiated hard with respect to the minimum side yard setback. We negotiated hard with respect to the requirements for buffers. We negotiated hard with respect to the traffic study requirements. We negotiated hard with respect to the height and the density and how this site would be developed. And we did that knowing, at least in my mind, that we were offering what we could,
Okay.
but needed to get to a certain place. And it's a trade-off. It's a difficult negotiation, and it's one you have to have publicly, and you do it with, you try to solve as many problems as you can.
I see. Thank you so much for that, Clary. That's very helpful. And we need to make sure as a committee, Mr. Chair, that we put that framework in there, that this was selected from many other options. My final question and follow-up is the question we've all been kind of teasing at. For me, it's the longitudinal income problem, right? So you're going to have something that's going to make money over time. Milton Hospital is selling this land. And so what we're being clear on saying, what I've heard, and let me confirm what I've heard, is that Milton Hospital will not receive any proceeds in perpetuity in connection to this project. What they will get, I'm assuming, the what's in it for them is to get the land sale. They'll also get the healthy clientele. They'll get some regular, visit revenue from people who literally have to just be carted over to here. So that's the Milton Hospital stream. is what I'm thinking, right? The town, everyone on this warrant committee knows how behind the eight ball we are on numbers. We would love another taxpayer, right? You know where you're hitting us. You're hitting us when we're down here. We almost have to say yes. You're offering us tax dollars there. But I think the townspeople are going to want to know clarity in terms of that financial deal a little bit more. So can you just reaffirm for us one last time that is there any other relationship? I mean, I'm not saying people may feel differently. I don't think it's a bad idea if there's some connection between Milton Hospital to get funds versus the funds leaving town and going to Northbridge altogether. So I'm kind of thinking about it a little bit the other way.
Yeah, let me try and answer it this way if I can. This is an asset that the hospital purchased in 1999. They've looked at it for a number of different things, whether to expand their campus, whether to sell it. It was under contract a number of years ago to be sold for a single family house lot. That fell apart. And they kind of went back through. The hospital did a really significant evaluation of its own needs. It's now part of the Beth Israel Deaconess system. It's not a standalone hospital. And so this is a sale. If we get to the other side of permitting, the sale will close. It is a 7-figure number, and the hospital will benefit. The hospital system will receive that revenue. It's a one-time shot. It is not a long-term ground lease. It is not an annual, payment of lease payments over a long period of time. There are some models where you see that, but that's not what's happening in this case. The town generates annual tax revenue starting at roughly $275,000 and growing over time. The hospitals otherwise benefits by maintaining a customer clientele, if you will. It's a synergy of service that's provided. But, the assisted living providers are regional and national entities. They're in the business of providing assisted living and memory care service. And they have to be in the business in order to be able to do it well. These guys do it very well. They're local. They're not Milton, but they're local. They're Massachusetts based. They're in Burlington, and most of their facilities are either in Eastern Massachusetts, Maine, and Eastern Connecticut. So they are local. The benefits remain local. I like to think that in the town of Milton, we have a lot of assets. It's a great town. We have three significant assets, I think, that really set us apart in many ways. The public school system, the privates, and the hospital. That hospital is a significant value add to the citizens of this community. It's a great hospital. It's around the corner. It's there when you need it. And it is a very good corporate citizen. I know there are separate issues and concerns about whether or not the hospital, Milton Academy, Curry College pay their fair share. From where I sit, they do more than pay their fair share. The hospital is an extraordinary asset for this community, and I would urge, and I think that's an important point to make and to think about in this case. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Coker.
We have to move the discussion along. Other questions? Henny, did that take care of what your concern was?
George, I'm easily satisfied someday.
What a guy. I know that is not the case, but we'll take your word for it. Your hand is still up. You have everything you need?
No, I just will put my hand down. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I think that what we need to do, since we don't have the exact wording of the recommendations yet, we have to, I think, take a sense of whether we are in favor of the concept, and then we can vote on the specifics when we have the wording on Monday, and that will make things a lot easier. So if this is the case, then the chair will entertain a motion. I think we have to vote on two separate motions, the bylaw motion and the planning board, the zoning change as a result of the planning board, and there are two issues there on the planning board. There'll be two bylaw changes as far as I can tell. So I guess what we need is a sense of whether we are in favor of those or not, and then we can vote on the specific wording once we have them.
If I may, George,
Go ahead.
I think you have two separate recommendations for two separate bylaw amendments.
They're two separate, but I thought they were by
Yes.
amendments to the same bylaw.
The first one is this, as an amendment to the bylaw to create a new section
Right.
of the bylaw that would authorize memory care, special care residents. That is one. The other is the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. That's a completely different
Oh, that's
proposal. I
that.
know,
We don't even have that
but
link.
there's only one
There's only one
recommendation
bylaw change
associated
here.
with this.
Okay, that's fine.
You
Okay,
would be
that's fine.
recommending to town meeting that they adopt the language of the proposed amendment.
Thank you for the clarification. I thought there were two components to that bylaw amendment alone. Okay, that's fine. All right, so I guess that we would have to have I'll take a vote of the sense of the committee to be in favor of it. So when we have the actual recommendation in front of us, we can vote on that. Is that reasonable to everybody? I see Erin shaking your head.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I don't think that we have to make a motion. I think we can just take a, kind of, we can just take a roll.
sense
I
of
mean, Lynn can do a roll and not count it as a motion. If we make a motion to actually do this right now, I don't understand why.
I don't think as I look at my notes here, it may not be binding, so it's not probably worth it
Right.
anyway. So
Right. And we don't have this. I thought we had this already.
we don't have
it.
we don't have the recommendation for it, and that's what we're voting. There you go. Right, got it.
Okay.
That's
So
what we
let's
need
just
to
take
have.
a sense. I mean, Lynn can call the roll and we can take a sense, but we
Yeah,
shouldn't
why
make a
don't we
motion.
take? I think that's fine. Lynn, can you take a roll and then we can have a sense of how it's going to go, and that way, Ned, you can report back to the powers that be that the warrant committee is favorable to it, and the vote will be. I think we have to take it Monday anyway, so we get our drafting begun. But we will have the actual recommendations in hand at that point.
So you need from
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one point of discussion. We've
Yeah.
said that this is conservation is a big part of this. We've always said conservation has to come back and be aligned to this. I just want to make sure
Well,
that
we can
opening
put
this up.
that in our opinion as we
Perfect.
write.
Okay.
Yeah, the opinion
Perfect.
has, whoever is writing the opinion, I think needs to incorporate concerns that include conservation, preference given to the town residents, which has been represented, but we want to make sure town meeting is aware that we've considered that preference as part of our recommendation, and to be sure that that is considered by them when we get to it.
Okay, perfect.
All right, Lynn, your hand is up.
Yes, I'm sorry. JJ, would you mind muting? We're getting the feedback from your, thank you. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear anybody. I don't know if I was the only one.
Okay, I wasn't sure where that interference was coming
So,
from, but that's
if
okay.
I may have one question about Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission is not going to meet for the sake of recommending whether this bylaw should pass or not.
But they do have input.
No, they have a review process over the development. Their jurisdiction is to protect the wetlands. When plans are filed, they have to review and approve plans. That won't happen until then. That won't happen for another 6 to 8 months.
What we can include in the opinion is the expectation that that review will be incorporated in plans, et cetera. I mean, we can do it. Maybe it may be gratuitous, but I think that there are going to be questions at town meeting asked once this is clear that there are wetlands involved. So I think we can head it off at the pass to some extent by saying the Conservation Commission will opine about these appeals, and that the opinion of the Conservation Commission must be considered as this process continues. Something to that nature. We'll phrase it appropriately, just to make sure that the town meeting is aware that we are aware that the Conservation Commission has been engaged, that it's active, and that it's going to be a part of the whole process of the construction and implementation of this project.
Correct.
That's I think what we want to.
There are two major permits that have to be secured. One is an order of conditions that would be issued by the Conservation Commission relative to wetland protection, and the second is a special permit of the Planning Board that would assess that all of the plans meet the requirements contained in this zoning from a planning board perspective.
Now, question on that, Ned. Is it the planning board that would incorporate the proviso that a majority of the beds be provided to town residents or to the parents of adult children? How does that get incorporated in something like this? I'm curious how that wording would be implemented.
That's a good question. I haven't seen that type of language incorporated into a zoning requirement. But I think the most logical body to negotiate the agreement would be the select board.
Yeah, okay. And I guess they still have to have input onto this as well. Okay, I think that we have. I think we've talked this one through pretty well. So I think, Lynn, do you want to take a role of how our sense would be when we do have the recommendation before us?
Sure. Lorraine,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
George,
I have to abstain. My wife has privileges at Milton Hospital.
Kristen,
Yes.
O'Henny,
I will also abstain.
Steve,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
George, that's 9 yeas and 2 abstains.
That's the majority, and I think we're all set. So I think on balance, Ned, you can report back that the warrant committee will recommend this to the town meeting once we have the recommendation in hand and have the specific language.
Great. I understand the town council's producing that for
Oh,
your
yeah.
review and approval.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you all very much. I
Ned,
appreciate
thank
it.
you very much.
Good night.
Happy New Year, and we'll see you soon.
Great. Happy New Year all.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, accessory dwelling unit conversation. We do not have, as far as I can tell, at this point, the final language to which we must apply our thoughts and our opinions. Do we have, we can talk about it because I'm hoping we'll get something from the planning board before we have to meet again on Monday. So here's the question. We have had many inputs. We had a very long meeting Monday night. Where do we stand on this? I know that it is a question that can ignite emotion. It can be divisive. It can bring us together, frankly. If we have a consensus, I can encapsulate some of the concerns, and there are pluses and minuses, of course, but I will encapsulate some of the concerns that I have observed and that have been voiced to me. A is the as of right provision, meaning that the homeowner can, as a matter of course, without going to the planning board or having a hearing or having a butters give input, put in a situation where they can have this kitchen and have this accessory dwelling unit. We've heard many opinions about that. I can say I've got several emails today from people who are opposed to that as of right. Saying that if it's going to happen, it should be something that the neighborhood should have know about and have an opinion about. Secondly, the question of okay, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in town that's illegal. These things are being Mickey Moused and jerry rigged, et cetera, and this is going to codify it. I understand why we need a bylaw to codify what is already happening and to make sure that what is done uniformly and done accurately. I've heard that there are concerns that 10 is a limiting number of permits that would be available. I've heard that, well, 10, you're never going to have 10. Well, I don't know how to think about that one, because I know that there are parts of town where it would be hard to have these accessory dwelling units and parts of town where it would be easy to have them, given the square footage of some of the homes in Milton. So I guess what I would put forward is that we need to have some sort of a sense of where we stand on all of these opinions, and unless and until we see the final language, or as we have in the past, recommend the planning board continue to do this, because I think we all received a Needham, Massachusetts accessory dwelling unit bylaw. I read that and it looked reasonably straightforward. I mean, are we reinventing the wheel here? I know Milton isn't Needham, I get that. But if there's a template that we can look at and apply, and then look at what we're doing, it seems like, you know, we're trying to do a lot of things at once, and I understand why. But I think the risk here is doing it badly and doing it so that some people are going to be disadvantaged and others may take advantage of something that's improperly drafted. And that's one thing that I think none of us wants to see happen. If there's an idea here that it is an important thing for the town, there's a lot of benefit to many people who are interested in having this, but there's also the risk that it can be abused, and that the density of the town, which is one reason why people move here, it is not a densely organized place. There are neighborhoods which are more than others, more thickly settled, but generally speaking, I mean, it's a lovely place to live. It's wide open spaces, and yeah, we pay for it in our taxes, but we all come in with our eyes open and we know what we're doing. And to see that whittled away, I don't think we want to be accused of being wholly resistant to change. I don't think we are. I think we are, from different perspectives, very open-minded about how the town needs to evolve and morph to the 21st century. I think we all come at from different levels and different angles, which is perfectly fine, which is why we're on this committee. But I think the end result has to be, if this is going to be done, it needs to be done thoughtfully and carefully so that we don't miss a chance to do something good for the town.
So, Mr. Chair, can I just
Yeah,
say a couple things?
Please. Yes, of course.
As you know, this is not the first time this has come to the Warrant Committee. And I just want the
Absolutely
new
not.
members on the committee to understand that, because that was something that was said on Monday evening, that this is being rushed and all this other stuff. I gotta tell you, I've got
I don't-
notebook full of it.
I don't think it's being rushed at all.
I don't
I
either.
agree with you on that one.
Okay.
But the question is, are we going down a rabbit hole in some of these things? And that's,
Possibly.
I know, and
Possibly.
that's
The by right piece is interesting to me, because when Kathleen talked about it, she said that the legislature had actually put that in legislation and the governor signed it, which means that it's statute, which means that it's law.
which
If that
means we
is-
don't have to say about it, ostensibly.
Exactly. So if
Right.
that's the case, if we don't put it in and we require people to go through a different process, they can sue the town.
Right, we'd be in violation. I get that.
We would. So
Right.
if the legislature did it, then all of this conversation around it needs to just be put aside, because we
Well,
have
it's moot at that
nothing to say.
Yeah, I agree. It's moot.
Okay.
I don't. So we got to
Okay.
find. Yeah. So let's see. I have several hands up. I think Kathy. I think I saw you first.
I was just going to say, I think there was a sense of people were thinking that this was rushed. I agree that it has not been rushed, because we have talked about this on multiple occasions. However, I think the piece that's being rushed is this change right now, because this change that we're looking at is significantly different than what we saw 2 years ago or a year ago.
I agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
And I've read a lot of the comments that have come in through different citizens, and the common theme that I got from that is that they didn't feel that they had input. And although Kathleen and Denny and the team have put tons of hours into this, and they're very passionate about this, I think on the other side, some of these other people that have raised issues are very passionate as well. So I think that if we were to put this to town meeting right now, it would be a disservice. I really think that we need to have more consensus with everybody and talk about some of these big issues, and they are significant changes for the town.
For sure. I agree with you. The observation that one of our speakers on Monday night made, which I don't necessarily think was completely accurate, is that this was being put through at a time of year where people are not paying attention, where their heads are elsewhere. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, if you wanted to rush something through, you'd put it through in the summertime when people are in Maine and New Hampshire at the Cape or wherever. But so I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, and a cynic would say, well, the federal government does that too. Why do you think tax day is April 15 and election day is November, first Tuesday in November? I mean, a big cynic would say, geez, if election day were April 16th, the government would look a lot differently than it does now. But we're not going to be cynical. We're going to try to be dispassionate and logical. I mean, here we have a situation where there are significant changes to the zoning, where there are some very good things in there. For example, identifying the square footage, saying that there has to be certain egresses and protections, and parking has to be adequate. I agree that that's a good thing. That's very positive. The other parts of it, I think we have to work on, and there's some maybe that should go back for more input from the communities now that they're aware and energized. Emily, I'm sorry, your hand is up.
Thank you. I mean, this is only my second year on the warrant committee, but I remember this coming up last year. And I think just one thing that stood out to me is that I think it kept getting called out that it's like Kathleen added that cap of 10, but she really didn't want it. And I think rather than seeing that as a negative, I think that willingness to compromise reflects on the fact that people feel so strongly one way or the other. So I would just say, while that I think people have negative feelings about one way or the other, some thinking that's too many and some thinking that's too few. What I see as a positive is that if this is something people are, I mean, honestly, it seems like something a lot of people are afraid of, that to me, having a cap feels like a really good way to venture into this. And then there is that possibility. I think sometimes people are afraid of things and then they realize after it's not that scary, that then there's that opportunity. I think there was a sense that it was somehow underhanded to have that compromise in there. And to me, it felt like it's a really good way to test the water and see how it goes. And then if people realize this isn't so scary, then there is that opportunity down the road. So that was something that I think there were a lot of feelings about, but in my mind, I responded positively because it just seemed like a compromise, which to me indicates good faith.
I think that's absolutely worth considering. Thank you. Dave, your hand is up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I get the sense that we're sort of taking a sense of where we're at on this thing. This is a general sense I'm in favor of the ADU situation. That being said, I think the reason why on our Zoom right now there's not an additional 25 people watching us is they're still watching the planning board meeting, which is still underway right now.
Yeah,
and I don't think we have a vote.
I'll interrupt you because I just got a text from Lynn that there may be coming up with wording for us to review shortly. So we'll see, right? Go ahead, I'm sorry, going.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And so it's true that this is a long and deliberative process. It's been ongoing. If you look at it, like Mr. Corcoran said, from 5,000 feet, we're moving along. But when we bring this thing down, like to right now, this very minute, we're talking about taking action on a proposal that is still being hammered out with significant terms. For instance, as of right, is a major concern that I have. And that may be in, it may not be in. We don't know at this time. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Let's see, JJ, you were next.
Sorry, couldn't find the mute button.
There you go.
Thank you. I guess, it's my first year on the Warrant Committee, and it sounds like you guys have been debating this for a while. And what I worry about is if we push this down the road again, it's going to be another year and then another year. And from what Ned talked about previously, and it seems, I'm new to Milton, I'm 3 years here, but my in-laws have been here for 30 years. And it does seem like this can keep going and getting kicked further and further down the line. And there's always going to be people complaining about it. So I think someone said previously, and I second it, that, 10 units seems like a reasonable way to start. I mean, is it really going to change the town's housing nature significantly to have 10 units a year? I mean, it just seems kind of ridiculous on its face given the amount of housing we have. 100 units over 10 years? It doesn't even make sense. And then finally, I would say the as of right thing, to be honest, I fully don't understand it. It seems like if Massachusetts has already passed this statute, then I don't understand how we can even. It confuses me, and I'd love to explore that more, but I do think there is a need for these units, and it is disheartening that I'm being told that this has been debated for years now, and I worry that that is going to continue into the future. Thank you.
Well, we hope it isn't going to go on forever because, I mean, the objective is to amend a bylaw which has been considered restrictive and to address abuses that have happened for accessory dwelling units that are illegal and badly put in and not overseen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a protection element to this as well. I think the fear is that if we don't consider all of the inputs from town residents, all of which are legitimate because, I mean, they're the taxpayers, we are the taxpayers, and many people have come in and said that there are components of it that have to be revised, should be rethought, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's hard not to listen to that. But I do take the point, kicking the can down the road is postponing the inevitable and making things harder for the people who are going to sit in these seats afterwards. So I take your point. Oh, Henny, JJ, have you finished? I don't want to cut you off.
I guess I would just say to that people do have their points, but I don't know. It does seem a little strategic on if what everyone is saying is true, and I haven't tracked this closely, but if it's been out there since August, and all of a sudden people need to put in their input now, I don't know. I just worry that that will happen going forward. But
Yep. I just got another note that they're walking through the language. There's not a ton of edits to discuss, but they're only just getting started. So this may be going on for a while. I have a feeling we will not see language tonight that we can address. But if we do get the language, if they finish it tonight and they do their edits and they are acceptable and they vote on it, then we can vote on it at our next meeting. And I think what will be incumbent on us, since this is really the last big thing that we have to do before we look at the budget, is to circulate it. Please read it, come up with an idea of whether or not this works to go to the town meeting. Again, we're just recommending it to town meeting. We're not deciding it. We're giving town meeting our reasoned analysis as to why they should be looking at it. In the past, our reasoned analysis is that it was not complete, it was not well thought through, there were flaws, If we come to the same conclusion but say, okay, town meeting, you talk about it, then I think that's a different kettle of fish than we've presented in the past. So I have a feeling that's where we're going to end up, because I think that, Henny, you had your hand up. I don't want to limit you.
Mr. Chair, I agree. And, Aaron asked a while ago about this, if we were in a room together. The way this would happen is Dave would say something and I would say, Dave, I agree with your point, but not that. And this is one of those topics where I think a discussion could be beneficial.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, I appreciate the way you've done this, because you laid out very clearly points. And I think you hit the issue on the head. This is one in which in all my time in the Warrant Committee, which is very short, 2 years, I've never seen a clearer example of this. The recommendation to the town is everything here. It's everything. We have to decide, like you said, can we see a town meeting adequately process this? And how do we do that? So that's why I'm suggesting that a good discussion could help us. So, for example, as a right, Dave came and said, I'm really concerned about that. I think we should have someone be able to say, this is the concern about as a right. However, Aaron would say, this is law anyway. So we got to set up the 2x2 almost table and write out the as a right and say, these are the considerations, and then go to the next point. I could see that being a helpful recommendation to the town as we go bullet by bullet. But to throw it to the town and say, that's going to be a 4, 5, 6 day town meeting. We already see.
Oh my God, it'll be a food fight like we've never seen before. I guarantee you that. I take your point. JJ, your hand is still up. Are you ready? Are you finished? Because if you are, I'll call on Dave because his hand just went up.
I am finished, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Dave, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to riff on O'Henny's point, like this is a, for instance, and it's a question I have, Mr. Chair, with regards to the opinion from town council on the as of right.
Yep.
Because what little research I was able to do was that the as of right provision was proposed and heard. But the only as of right provisions that I could find that were enacted into law that were to be signed by the governor was a change in the definitions with regards to the statute that wouldn't change it. Furthermore, the planning board with the push that some members, and they're the planning board, are the push that they're putting into as of right and the controversy there with regards to it, if it was moot by law, they wouldn't be doing it.
Right.
Which all says to me, not the law.
That we can certainly ask the question of town council. We get that answer, that makes it easy. But I will say this, I do not believe the planning board is uniform on their agreement on as of right. In fact, I know it isn't because I got an email from one of the members of the planning board that violently opposed to the as of right provision, et cetera. So I mean, this is not a monolithic thing by any definition. So I agree. I'm listening very carefully to what you're saying as well. That having that as an input will make it easier for us to walk through our analysis. Kristen, you have a question or a comment?
No, I just want to say, I think, kind of what O'Henny said is it just seems like the residents, I've seen more about this, emails coming in from Warrant and, social media posts about this, and I've seen about anything we've discussed on the Warrant. So I think, it really just, falls on us to make sure that we listen to the residents and are really respectful and kind of discuss through point by point the as of right thing. I've seen residents of our town, very concerned about. So just, that we take the time to really talk that through, I think is important.
I agree. I will say I have received several emails and a couple of phone calls even from people I've known who are not in favor of this. So and some go point by point by point by point as to why they're not. And so sure. JJ, I understand moving in town. I can give some perspective. I grew up here. I'm the third generation of my family to live here. My grandchildren are the fifth generation. So we have a long history here, and this is not the same town I grew up in, certainly not the same town my grandparents moved to. So I remember going over to Thatcher Farm to feed the cows when I was in the third grade. That's how this town has changed, for example. And to expect that it stays static is absurd because nothing does. But I think in our listening to the town residents, yes, we listen, but we also have to be circumspect because we owe them that much, that nothing is going to stay the same. We can't keep it the same for many different reasons. And we have to recognize changes in the way we care for our elderly, the way people's needs change, the way families govern themselves very, very differently. So I think that after a fashion, yes, we have to be attentive to what the town residents are saying, because ultimately they're going to vote this. It's the town meeting. Again, the town meeting votes this, not us. But we have to come up with what is really germane to the discussion and what is either emotional or tangential. And I use those words carefully because emotion can govern a lot of what is substantive, but it can also cloud the article and cloud the discussion. I think we have to be very, very careful of that. O'Henny, your hand is up again.
So there are 2 points I want to make and to sort of spur the discussion a little bit. One is with regard to Kathy, your point earlier, where you said, look, so many people are protesting. And I think, Kristen, your point, we need to hear them out. Now, I'm a big fan of hearing people out and doing it. But then I hear JJ's point of, look, he's gonna, he doesn't want his kids to be debating this on the Warrant Committee, right? And still not have done anything. And so,
but
George is really, George will still be here, I'm sure.
Oh,
managing the but
You carried me out feet first with that
so
one.
we'll see. The question on that, Kathy, is we had two members of planning committee, as Georgia stated, who don't agree. Normally the committee comes unified and then we got to compete against the town. Normally that's what happens. This time the committee is split. And so I would say this is a different case in which we have to move a little more judiciously. The decision to go forward, and I think I know Kathleen said this, they will never agree. So we know
Yeah,
that they will
right.
never agree.
That's true. Yeah,
So
that's
if
true.
we kick it back to them, normally we can send it back. We know they're not going to agree. So does that, and I don't know, Kathy, this changes your mind at all. Does that make it give us a greater impetus to find ways to get it to the town, not kick it back? That's the first one. The second one is another provision that we haven't discussed yet, which was the one about family. Is it grandma and grandpa, or the five up to four grandmas, five grandmas? How is there a number there, or can it be? Can it be, cousin Pookie who lives next door? George's third cousin removed who now needs a place. Can it be, what defines a family and relative? What defines you saying this person's not related enough to you to put in this? Well,
But
I
it's
think
not
those lines
related,
are difficult.
Henny, but it's not. You cannot write that into anything that says that only family members can move in. That is actually illegal. So it is against the law to write that in there. You cannot tell somebody who can live in their home. I could find a homeless guy on the street right now and invite him into my home, and that's my right to do so. And so, no, it's not just family. I want to make sure that folks are clear about that.
Okay. That's helpful, Aaron. So then that debate is moot too. That point is not worth arguing over.
It's something that would probably be tested. Um, I don't know. I don't know what the legal aspect of that would be. I can't answer that. That may be another good question for town council, that it has to be an affidavit filed as to who is going to live there. All right, Aaron, you're shaking your head again and you're muted.
Guys, this is, come on. Can we just stop for a second and think? Do you think that if somebody is renting out, let's say that they own a two-family, do you think they have to tell anybody who they are renting to unless they are a
No.
sex offender? They
No,
do
no.
not. So everybody just take a breath for a minute and think about what we are actually saying we are trying to impose on our neighbors here. This is not the end of days where we're going to move in giant families with 10 kids. It's 2 bedrooms maximum. And so let's, I understand that it's emotional, but good God, we are not moving in the Clampets here. Like, this is NIMBYism at its utmost right now. So can we just take a breath and realize that we cannot put laws or bylaws or anything like that on people? They have actual rights. We have rights as human beings, and we have rights as property owners.
Well, that's true. You bring up a good point, because limiting who can live where is outlawed by the Fair Housing Act of 1965. So that's an easy one, I guess. Okay, Kathy, your hand was up.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. Henny, when Kathleen was talking about disagreeing, she was talking about disagreeing with Alex. And to the best of my knowledge, Alex is not on the planning board right now. So he is a citizen, if you will, not necessarily on the board. So I don't know if there are 2 people on the planning board that are disagreeing or not, but certainly Kathleen and Alex do disagree, but Alex is not on the planning board. Okay. And I was just quickly taking a look, Aaron, on the document that we got from the other town. I think that limits it to family.
If they want to put that in there, but I could have a house and I could file it, and then I could move in. Who defines family? I could move in, my great aunt's nephew.
So, here it is.
I could actually challenge that in a court of law.
Right.
And so
I just found it says the occupancy of the unit is, let me see, it's not owner occupied, shall be limited to a member of the owner's family or a caregiver and such caregiver's family. So there is a little bit of exception there.
Right. So the owner occupied is actually in our language as well. You have to be owner occupied.
But this is talking about the non-owner occupied unit. Okay, so the owner lives in one, the other one's a non-owner. In that unit, it says it has to be a family member or a caregiver or the caregiver's family. So someone who's basically I'm employing them to take care of me. So
Right.
so that opens the door for not just limiting it to family.
Do they have
But
to
I don't know.
register them, Kathy? Do we have to
It
register
doesn't
people?
say that they have to register them.
So I can
Right.
say somebody's helping shovel my driveway.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay, just making
Yeah.
sure, because
Yeah.
there's always a
So-
workaround.
There's a workaround. Yeah.
yeah, there is a way around it. Kathy, have you finished?
Yes,
I
thank
don't
you.
want anybody off. Steve, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
just have a quick question. In the last revision we got, I think today or yesterday, there was a paragraph slashed out that said only a single family or a single addition can be added to a single family. Does that mean you can put multiple of these things on a house? Because that's what I'm reading. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I'm reading.
I interpreted it as only
It was
one.
one, just
But
one.
it said only one ADU may be created within a single family, and somebody crossed that paragraph out.
Oh, that's a change.
That is a change. Yeah, but these are edits. I don't think these edits were voted on. That's the whole point, and that's what they're going through tonight.
Okay, so don't worry about what I'm reading right now. Wait till I get the final revision.
I think we have to wait till we get the final reading. This is my point to them.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised when they said they hadn't voted on it Monday night, because we've been here before. I hate to say it. And unfortunately, the biggest hurdle we've had is to address the planning board's schedule. I mean, ordinarily, we've just been out of sync from as long as I can remember. And that has complicated our ability to address some of these really circuitous bylaws and the changes, because they do require us to do exactly what we're doing now. Ordinarily, we've done it while we're in the middle of the budget too.
Mr. Chair, when I was in their meeting, because
Yeah.
I'm crazy and I joined it at 6 o'clock, because I'm like that.
That's
they
heroic.
they actually took out the as a right piece. And
Okay.
Kathy's right. Kathleen literally said to Alex, I don't agree with you, but I'm taking this out. And so, we don't even know what they're going to show us, because it could be
Right.
completely different, you guys.
Oh yeah. I mean, that red line so much that it looked like it had undergone surgery without anesthesia. I mean, it was frightening. But I think after we go through this, we may end up saying, this looks pretty good, let's go with it. We may end up saying, ooh, I hate to sound like Lucille Ball, but yeah, I mean, that's where we are.
So do we have a right to go through paragraph by paragraph and agree with
we're
some and disagree with other?
We're obliged to.
Okay.
We're obliged to look at this that way, because and it's I hate to point fingers, but I remember one Speaker of the House, when a piece of legislation that was 867 pages was passed a few years ago, said, let's just pass it and figure out what's in it later.
Yeah, we'll read it later.
And that became Obamacare. But anyway, that we won't go there. The point is that we are obliged to look at these things, and I like to think that we do. I certainly do. And I like to think that everybody here as well, because you're all incredibly smart and accomplished people. And this is the homework that we do. So anyway, yes, we can. And on balance, I think what we have to do is weigh what we get to see if the end result is worth the sacrifice that may be attached to some of the provisions. That's I think that has to be our governing beacon here. And then we decide at that point, will the town meeting take, because the town meeting could go through and vivisect it. And we've seen them do that. I mean, how many opinions and how many amendments and how many edits, and holy Moses, we can go through that for hours. JJ, your hand is up.
Thanks. I mean, it seems like we could debate this ad infinitum, and
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I guess I'm just going to try and present a couple of, I don't know. I agree with a lot of what everyone is saying. So thank you guys. I guess a couple of new points, I guess, to just talk about what Erin just said and put on your thinking hat. A lot of people complain about this and say that developers are going to come in and they're going to be, I don't know, they really make it sound apocalyptic, that they're going to be like hordes. And I guess I'm just putting on my thinking hat, and I'm thinking, in order to get one of these ADUs, you have to be living in the property. So what big time developer is going to move in and then live in Milton and then build this ADU, live there for 2 years, and then flip it for 100 grand? It doesn't make sense. It just does not make sense.
No, I agree.
So, like, these arguments are, there are some arguments against this thing that are just ingenuous on its face. And it really makes me angry because this town needs a diversity of housing, and we should be weighing the pros and cons of serious arguments. Because there are serious arguments against ADUs, I believe, but
Yep.
this is not one of them. So I don't want to, like, I don't know how we can strike these comments down. I know we have to weigh all this thing. I know this, but I just want to present that as an idea to everyone. And it's just, anyways. The second.
Hey, JJ, hang on 2 seconds. Go back a little bit. When you said there are arguments against the ADUs as conceptually, elaborate on that just a little bit. I'm interested to.
Honestly, I'm just a person who weighs pros and cons, so I know people are could be against ADUs for a million reasons, and I'm fine with that. But I don't want people making up reasons that are just wrong and just don't make any sense. And I don't want.
I get that. Yeah, I think we agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely. I think this committee particularly is not about to go and find reasons just to have reasons. I don't think there's enough stuff that we have. So I think that we have to look at the provision as it exists and as it's voted by the planning board and see if it does make sense.
Yes, but it's kind of infuriating to have to sit through these comments and just know that this is something, I don't know, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. You're 100% right. Emily, please.
Sorry, George, one more thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were done.
The second thing that I was wondering about is I think Alex Whiteside was saying there should be a study of the pros and cons of this. And I'm just worried, or I'm just wondering if that would happen, and if so, how long that would take. And
I can't tell you how long it would take. And that was a question that I wanted him to elaborate on. You know, who would do this study? I mean, who undertakes it? Who commissions it? Whether it's the select board, the planning board, or I don't think we can, because we don't have a budget for that. Because, you know, an individual who would do this I mean, it's an interesting concept, and that was one that you know, I didn't want to bring up, but since you have brought it up, this could be an area where we could actually urge the town meeting to ask the planning board to do that before it's enacted. Let me throw that out. What would you all think of that as part of our opinion?
I mean, since I'm off mute, I'll go first. I think that could be, you know, that's an invitation to just have this open for another couple of years. Or
why don't you ask Alex how the bylaw committee's doing?
It depends on how long it takes.
I like that one. That's good.
I mean, seriously, it's a way to kick it down the road for another 3 years. They keep coming to us on the bylaw committee saying that they can't get time to, you know, put the bylaws online for the people in Milton to read. Well, maybe he should spend some time doing that instead of sitting at the planning board all the time. If they come again this year, George, I'm voting no.
What, for the bylaw committee?
Yeah, for another extension. It's ridiculous.
Oh, get ready for it. I think it's going to happen.
I know it is, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean, this
get
is
ready
just
for
another
it.
way for them to keep things out of the public's hands.
I don't understand why it isn't already online, but that's, you know, I come from a very different background where, you know, we get things done, right? JJ, thank you. Are you done? I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
Okay, Emily, your hand was up next, then Dave.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I think what JJ said in his comment about developers, that was something that stood out to me too, because I saw it in some of the commentary against this, and also had that same reaction of, like, this doesn't seem like a real concern given the stipulations around being owner occupied. And it does just make me think like we really need to be aware of like how this conversation is structured, because I think like we know there's wariness around developers and what they're doing in town, and I think it's just a word that inspires fear for a lot of people, which
What,
was
developers?
the like just this idea of like developers will use this, I think is something that like without delving too much into it scares a lot of people. And I think it just, the tone made me a little uncomfortable the other day between that. And then, I mean, I will say being in my second year, something I've really appreciated being on this committee is I think when people ask questions, you all share your experiences just to give a little insight into different perspectives. And I think that there were some members where that was being, it was suggested that they were like self-interested, whereas really I think people were just trying to kind of show a different perspective and help people understand. And I am just concerned about like that tone continuing, because I think we all know like people just have strong opinions either way. And I do think like this really needs to go to the town. But my concern is just like how, like, is there a way we can do something to try to keep the focus on the real issues and not get derailed by things like that? Because it just,
You again bring up a very good point. I think we've all sat through town meetings. Unfortunately, those of you who never sat, who have been on just for the past year, missed the Milton High School auditorium experience, which is different than being on the Zoom call. I think in many ways, you get the sense of I have to pick the right word here. The tone, I guess, of the town meeting is different when you're all together than when we're on the Zoom call. It's good. It's better in some ways, and in others, it's much worse. But I think that your point that we really have to couch this for the town. If we go forward and recommend it, we have to couch this to the town meeting in such a way that they appreciate that there are pluses and minuses, and nobody's going to agree on everything. We know that. I mean, spouses don't always agree on everything, okay? So to expect that the town meeting with 200 and some odd people are going to say, yeah, this is great, or no, hell no, we want their heads. It's not going to happen. So I think our objective has to be to couch it in terms of outlining the positives and the risks that we see and the mitigants to those risks, and the positives that this bylaw change could bring to the town, as well as the things that we have to be aware of as potential problems. So I agree with that, and that's going to be the trick, and we won't know that until we see the final language. After all, there was another hand up, and I'm sorry, was it you, Dave?
I did have it up, but I took it down. I'll just say what I was going to say, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please do.
One of your questions was, it was, should we start thinking about possible, comments in the final? I think it's just a little premature at that point.
It is, yeah.
Because I would not be surprised at all if we get a recommendation from the planning board that's not unanimous. I could see where our vote might not be unanimous. There might be a lot of compromise. We might need to structure something to take into account people who might be a yes with reservations, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're just sort of bated breath, waiting to see what we actually get from them.
I agree with that. And I think the opinion, this is probably it's going to be the most challenging opinion that we have had to draft, I think, because this one cuts really to the heart of how the town develops organically. And I'm not talking about somebody coming from the outside. This is an organic change to the town, because you're talking about homes that have been there for a while, that are going to be different, that will be used differently. And that's just going to take, get used to it. It's going to happen because the way people care for their families, I think that one of the things that this pandemic has shown us is that to warehouse, I hate to use that term, but I can't think of another one, elderly folks or people who ordinarily would otherwise have stayed in their homes. I mean, my grandmothers, we took care of in our house, but this was, 40 years ago. But, send them to a nursing home? No, we can't do that to grandma. And it was nice. They died in their beds, and both of my parents the same way. Can everybody do that? No. Would everybody want to do that? Are they equipped to do it? Probably not. But I think with the pandemic and the changes that we've seen in society and the fears that we've seen as a result of, the dense housing of elderly patients or infirm patients who have care needs has changed a lot. And I think that's not a bad thing, generally speaking. And I know many of you out there also do take care of disabled relatives or relatives in need or elderly relatives as long as you possibly can. And I think this is what we're recognizing, and I think we have to be sensitive to that. At the same time, we have to be careful that we don't open the floodgates and ignite the fears that I have seen in emails of people worrying about, helter-skelter, really badly done additions to homes or the corruption of old homes in one way or another is the way they've looked. That was actually a word that was used in an email that I got. So yes, emotions are running high, but we have to be careful how we put it to the town. And I don't disagree with anything that's been said.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Henny.
Thank you. So from a public health perspective, the way I think about this is right now I'm sitting in a house that's beautifully designed, open plan, ugly on the outside, but beautiful on the inside. And open plan, very popular, knocked down all the walls. I got 3 kids with COVID and 1 without, and the 3 of us who don't have it are trying to figure out how to make it work in open plan. I need some walls. I need a second kitchen. I can see very much if this is going to be a pattern every year, I'm going to throw up an ADU just to put my COVID kid, have a COVID shelter, frankly. I'll be honest, and from a public health perspective.
Have you thought of one of those tiny little houses?
I mean, you kind of, it almost doesn't make sense. So I'm arguing against the 10 cap just because I think, you got to put these people, if we're going to be sick, if this is going to be a pattern. So just from a public health perspective, I'm with JJ, a little bit. And I think we don't need to overthink it and do too much. For me, the key part about the structure not changing outside was important, right? This, like Erin said, this is inside your house. So that's one. And the public health perspective, I think, too, is it's an important consideration. As far as the tone stuff, Emily, I agree with you completely, but that's been a longer problem. We can say there's not going to be problems in this neighborhood, but I can see problems in other neighborhoods, right? We know a lot of that. All of us, our neighbors are perfect. Other than that one person with the garbage can and stuff that we saw last year that we had to get involved in. But
that was easy. That was a piece of cake to deal with. Let's have another one of those.
Very classily.
Where's Mrs. Franklin when we need her?
Exactly. That's what we need. But so I think there's an important consideration here. The one serious consideration that I think will come up that we should be prepared for is, and Dave, you talk about fair comments. I wonder if this is one. And JJ, if you talk about this one, the fact that this will expand the need for additional 40B housing to offset this. Now, we as a town have fallen short of our mark of 40. We paid the penalty. We've seen it. This is something that needs to happen. They're going up now. People are upset with it. We have to cross this 40B line. That's a whole nother debate. And I'm wondering if a lot of this is not really about some of that. But I don't know what people think about that. And if Kathleen was very clear, this will increase the need for 40B housing to offset the additional dwelling. So we just need to be prepared to consider that in our comment.
And that was a point that was brought up by a couple of people who communicated with me in the last 2 days, that we may be opening a Pandora's box here if this goes through unlimited, if you will, which is one reason why I think why the limitation was put in. I'm guessing. We do have a 40B problem. I think we're all sensitive to that problem. It's happening, but the question of the hurdles that are being put up is the planning board's issue, not necessarily ours. I think we have probably walked through this as much as we can, and we really need to see the final language before we go further. What I will point out, and I'm very grateful to all of you for the very thoughtful commentary, and I think the town if people are watching this, I hope they appreciate that we don't just rubber stamp things going through. This is probably the most comprehensive discussion we've had about a very important issue in a great while.
Well,
But
Mr.
one
Chair,
thing that
we're
I-
up against the school committee and the planning board, which are both meeting now at the same time. So
Oh,
I
good.
don't
Then
know how many
maybe
viewers
they
we
won't
got.
care about us. Although I will say there are a couple of women's groups that dial in and watch us because they think we're entertaining. And I have to say, some of the stuff that we actually talk about in some of the commentary is a lot more fun and entertaining than the planning board stuff, which can be pretty dry. So anyway, back to the subject at hand. We will meet on Monday. Once we have this language, I urge you very, take whatever time you need. And I appreciate that you're all busy. But this one requires real thought. This is going to require probably at least one, if not two of us, maybe three of us to draft an opinion. So keep that in your head. There's only 6 that we have to do, and a couple of them are just easy. This one is going to require real thought and a little bit of léger de main. I also have to say that even though we might write an opinion that's worthy of a Supreme Court decision, I don't know how many people on the town meeting actually read what we write, which is a little bit sobering, and I'm not going to say upsetting, because when Bob Hiss and I do the Bob and George show before each town meeting, he says, well, what would you like the members of the town meeting and the town to do? And I say, that's an easy one, Bob. Read the warrant. Read what we write, because that will answer many of the questions. I mean, how many times do we sit through the town meeting and every question that we have asked is asked 5 times in a row? It's like, okay, what did you miss the first question? The answer hasn't changed. I mean, so anyway, I get a little exercised about that because I know we put in a lot of thought, and it just, what did we do this for if you didn't read the damn thing? So I guess the point is that we have to be very careful in how we draft it for those who actually do read it, because it will make a difference. And I hope it will make a difference, because I think that as the warrant is published, they may even, you may even get an editorial in the paper, because this is something that is very visceral. And will get a lot of people's attention, even those who might not ever tune into what's going on. So I think we've gone about as far as we can, unless anybody has anything else they want to add. Good. All right, you guys are great. Okay, so if that's the case,
Can I just ask just one quick question?
Oh yeah, please.
Well, first, I like that we're in the phase of the pandemic that people tune into Warrant Committee for enjoyment.
I'm sorry.
But
what was that?
I like that we're at the phase in the pandemic where people are tuning into Warrant Committee for enjoyment. 2 years in.
Frightening. Really frightening.
Yes. But anyway,
Well, we don't have Betty White anymore, so we might as well try to fill in the void there.
Is there, as a new member, I have some time flexibility, so would love to help comment, help draft comment. Is there some kind of like framework or something, as we, especially like for the large warrant?
If you had, I'll tell you what might be helpful, and I know we have done this in the past. I know a couple of other members have done this. If one or two of you wanted to put your heads together and to put together this is what is being proposed, this is what's going to make it different, this is the positive, this is the negative. If you had the time to do that for us, and possibly even incorporate it, if we decide to do it this way, into the warrant, that may be helpful. That may crystallize things for people. So just a thought. I'm not asking, I'm not assigning, I'm just saying that very, very clear illustration, because I mean, everybody likes pictures, right? And that's basically what this would be.
Great.
But I think that would not be. I think honestly, as I project forward, that may be a very helpful tool for the town meeting members to review what is being proposed and what might change, what would change if the town meeting adopted it, and what would happen conceivably, how many units could be put in, what the downside is, et cetera. Is it going to make it easier? The provisions would be how the ease of applying the oversight for codifying the safety of a unit put in, for example, which I think is a consideration. The density issue, I mean, how many people could be in these units, in the accessory dwelling units? You know, if it's 2 bedrooms, I mean, theoretically, you could have three to five people, I'm assuming, but probably not that many. What reasonably can you fit in a 900 square 2-bedroom unit? I mean, I think 5 people would be very tight, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. I mean, again, the extremes, you know, usually it would be, I mean, I know one instance of a mother-in-law who moved in with her adult children, who had their own children, who had her own area, her own kitchen, but I think it was probably 900 square feet, but you know, she had the kitchen there, but I think what she do, she boiled water for a cup of tea, and maybe an English muffin in the morning because she couldn't stand the noise the kids made at breakfast. I'm assuming it's things like that that will happen. So I think putting ourselves in these scenarios might be very helpful. Kathy, go ahead. You have your hand up. You're muted.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I'm not sure, Kristen, were you asking about this particular article, or were you talking about in general?
I mean in general, and yeah, and I
Yeah,
can help
that's
on
what
this
I was
article
thinking.
as well. Yeah.
So when I first came on, I went and got some old warrants and read those and just took a look. Did the article start with what did the planning board recommend, and then what did the warrant committee recommend? And that gave me a sense of how to write one.
Right.
And there is templates that we use for the budget piece of this, Kristen. So the ones that come every year, those are you just churn those out. Those you're just basically replacing numbers. Those are easy. So there is some template, but not for this kind of stuff.
Not for this. This one's a bird of rare plumage.
Right. And it might be helpful, Kristen, for you maybe to work with someone else on one, you know, just as a first timer.
Don't worry, we're not going to throw you in the deep end.
Okay.
That happened to me my first year, and I know how I felt, but I'm still here. So you don't really die. You live to fight another day. Okay, so I think that we have covered a great deal of ground. I for one am going to be really interested to see what they come up with in terms of their edits, and I think we all will. Let's get back together Monday evening. We will have our quick votes on the other recommendations once we get them. They should not take very long. This one we'll spend some time on because we'll have the edits. And I know that as much as you can, being prepared will be extraordinarily helpful. So I thank you all very much. And if there is no other business that we have, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. No discussion. Thank you all. Lynn, please take the roll.
Lorraine.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
JJ.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
George.
It's frozen.
George.
Oh, Henny.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Erin.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
George.
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you all very much.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody.
See you Monday. Good night.
Feel free to join the planning board meeting now, folks. Come on over. I'm
More
going.
fun.
Bye.